Tonight on 48 Hours.
Little tornadoes and things don't scare us, but this one's a big one.
Hurricane Gilbert. An angry giant of a storm raging through the Gulf of Mexico, leaving a 500-mile wide path of destruction strewn across the Caribbean. Now aiming its deadly eye at America's coast.
170-mile-an-hour winds, Galveston's history.
Be prepared, that's the whole thing, just be prepared.
We're looking mostly for batteries. Every place we've been so far has been out.
A special edition of 48 Hours. Hurricane Watch. Good evening, I'm Dan Rather. Right now, 100-mile-an-hour winds are whipping up the sea along the Texas coast, and the full force of one of the worst hurricanes officially recorded this century is still 12 hours off the U.S. mainland. The danger to life and the threat to property is so great that we sent our 48-hour cameras and crews into the wet and windy path of this hurricane, postponing our scheduled broadcast on infertility until a later date. So come along with us now for a special 48-hour look at how Americans are preparing, because Hurricane Gilbert is coming ashore, ready or not. Now, here's the latest on what the hurricane hunters tell us about Gilbert. The hurricane does appear to be gaining strength again in the Gulf of Mexico, 310 miles southeast of Brownsville, Texas. Sustained winds at the center at about 120 miles an hour, apparently headed up. While it may take a turn to the north, it is heading west-northwest right now. Its movement speed about 12 to 15 miles an hour on a path that, if the path holds, would take it into the South Texas coast sometime tomorrow. To get an idea of what Friday may be like on the Gulf Coast, Gilbert is just about as strong, maybe even stronger, than it was 48 hours ago when it smashed into Jamaica, just about destroying most of that island. Correspondent Victoria Corderi and one of our 48 Hours crews spent the day in a small Texas town that lies smack dab in the path of the storm.
Port Isabel is a town of 5,000. Port Isabel may turn out to be ground zero in the attack by Hurricane Gilbert.
Okay, here's the latest report. We have emergency management and city officials have been recommended that the official evacuation of South Padre Island and all other Gulf Beach areas of Cameron County begin at 9 a.m. this Thursday morning. That's what we have.
By nightfall, if these emergency planners are successful, it will be a ghost town.
I just want to make sure that everybody understands, everybody knows that everybody has to be out at 6 o'clock.
City manager Manuel Hinojosa will be the last one to leave. His job is to make sure Port Isabel is secure.
What's the feel here? I mean, if you were to describe the atmosphere here?
We know something. We know that when we come back, there's going to be a lot of work to do, a lot of rebuilding. I mean, I don't care if that hurricane hits below our area or above our area, the effects of that hurricane are going to be felt. And I see a lot of work.
We got a lot of shrimp in here. If it stays down to what it is, I don't think we'll have any problems with them here.
You have 5 boats?
5 boats. One is up the coast somewhere, but we don't know where. So that's my main concern. I know where these are. My problem is knowing where that other fella is.
A.T. Galloway has been shrimping since 1937.
I think it'll probably turn. They never do what they're told. Have you ever seen one do what it's been predicted to do yet? Not hardly, so I figure it's going to make a liar out of them yet.
You think you'll still have your business when you get back?
Well, what we figure, if we're still in business when we get back, we're going to have a good run of shrimp, which is always the case after a bad hurricane.
You have to take a positive attitude. And when they take that kind of a positive attitude, my
almost frighteningly positive?
Yes. Yes. But, you know, what do you expect? I mean, they have everything to lose here.
We started packing yesterday.
No, Philip,
I guess basically we got our personal belongings, what we need to have with us, especially because of the baby. And come here, honey.
Barbara and Elvin Grayson just closed their outboard motor business early this morning. Now they're moving all of their belongings inland, leaving nothing behind. Nothing to chance.
What are you thinking?
We're thinking that this won't be here when we come back. If it's that big, or if it gets bigger than what it is, this won't be here. We know it's coming, and we know how much time we have left to get out. And if you can run a piece of paper across that, we know we have enough time to get out, and that's all I'm worried about. And if we don't get everything out, the rest can blow away. I don't care.
As long as you get out, right?
Yes. I mean, this is my main concern right here. If she's far enough away, she's safe. That's all that matters to me.
The eye of the storm is nearing Texas, but the most important people who have their eyes on the storm may be those watching from Florida, the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, where correspondent Bernie Gilbert, who regularly works with me here on 48 Hours, is standing by with the latest. Bernie?
Dan, your opening comments were right on the money. As we speak, the pressure inside Hurricane Gilbert is dropping, and what that means is that the storm is getting better organized. Top winds right now at 120 miles an hour almost certainly will be picking up as this night progresses. Right now, the storm is about 310 miles southeast of Brownsville, Texas. Now, if the forecasters are right now, and I mean literally right now, the storm is starting to very slowly shift northward. If it continues on that smooth track that it came over here all the way across the Caribbean on, it should hit land sometime tomorrow, and it should hit land someplace right around Brownsville. Now, Dan, you've chased enough hurricanes to know how erratic these storms normally can be. This one, however, seems to be moving right on, very smoothly, very methodically, and right over that next horizon is Brownsville, Texas.
Thanks, Bernie. And we'll be checking back with Bernie for the latest from the Hurricane Center, especially on whether the hurricane makes that slight north turn later in this broadcast. The hurricane slammed into the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico less than 36 hours ago, leaving behind remarkable destruction on Cancun. Its winds at that time, 175 miles an hour sustained, with gusts to 200. Communications were knocked out on Cancun, and while details are still sketchy, we have these reports. Thus far, 2 known deaths, babies who apparently drowned. 100,000 people were evacuated and are just now going home. The area around Cancun is without electricity and drinking water, very poor communications. The death toll overall from the hurricane, now nearly 40, damage estimates above $8 billion. The storm claimed 10 lives in Haiti, 5 in the Dominican Republic, 2 in Mexico, that's as much as we know, and worst hit so far, confirmed, Jamaica, where nearly 20 people died. Dr. Bob Ardon, our 48 Hours cameras flew in to the battered Caribbean island of Jamaica today.
How many of you need food?
All of us.
How many of you need clean water?
All of us. All of us.
How many of you need bedding?
All of us. All of us.
How many of you need clean sheets and clothing?
All of us here. All of us.
How many of you have no place to go?
All of us here.
The Jamaican government estimates that there are 500,000 homeless. Several hundred of them are here at the National Arena, and this morning they were getting desperate. I don't see any food here.
No, we have no food. We have no food.
Is there water?
Nothing. No water.
No food. No water. Is there anything to sleep on?
Just water to sleep on.
So they've given you this, which is a protein energy drink, but it's all.
We have to just
it's dry. It's dry powder. Well, it's dry powder.
Yes.
There's nothing to mix it with and no way to drink it. They have no food either at Bull Bay, outside Kingston, whose road just opened today, and where Amphi Banton used to have a home.
The roof tear off, and we are screaming inside here, and we try to get inside here, and this door blow off, and we grab the baby, some run underneath the bed, and we try to run out, and the breeze try to blow them away.
You're the cook?
Yeah.
Hey, are you worried about this meat being old, too warm?
Yeah, it's a bit tough.
It's a bit tough?
Yeah.
But I mean, when you leave meat out like this for a long time, when it's warm, you get germs in it.
Yeah,
Now, are you drinking this?
No. I don't have any other choice.
You have no other choice but to drink this water. You know you can get sick from it then.
Yeah, they say we must boil it and put it to settle.
Are you doing that now, boiling it in?
I didn't have the time to do it this morning.
All right.
Let's go inside.
It's no better up the road at Mount Zion Church, where Amphi and 300 others have been living since Monday.
They are badly needing food, especially these little ones. And the whole people, they are whole.
So you've told the Office of Disaster Preparedness you need food, and you've got nothing.
Nothing. I told them we need food and clothes for the children and the people.
Your member of parliament came by with food for 300 people, and each family got this much food.
Yes. Just a little rice.
And that's it.
And some don't.
Is that all the food you've had for 3 days?
That's all.
That's all.
That is the water we have to use now, you know. This is what the water looks like.
How old is she? 6 months. She's 6 months old. And how long has she been sick?
About 3 days.
So she's been sick 3 days. She has what you call running belly.
Yes.
So that means she has diarrhea.
Yes.
Do you have any medicines for her?
No.
Have you been able to give her any special food or water?
No.
Has there been a doctor to see her? 7 hours after our first visit, the refugees in the National Arena finally got their first meal since Monday. And Amphi Banton still looks to the heavens for an answer. You've been through the worst hurricane of the century. Do you have any advice for Americans who are about to get hit by the same storm?
The only thing they can do is pray and ask the Lord to have mercy upon them.
As this special hurricane edition of 48 Hours continues, we'll have a live report from CBS This Morning's Harry Smith on the coast at Corpus Christi, Texas, as the Gulf Coast bolts down the hatches. And a report on wind, high wind, what it's like to come face to face with 100-mile-plus-an-hour wind. David Martin will tell you. So stay with us as this special hurricane edition of 48 Hours continues.
McDonald's invites you to be part of the U.S. Olympic team.
He needs a perfect 10.
When you play McDonald's when the U.S. wins, you win Olympic game.
He approaches the handstand.
When the U.S. wins a medal in the event on your game piece, you win too. Win a Big Mac, regular fries, or medium soft drink. Or you can win $100,000 in Olympic gold coins instantly.
He did it!
And you can too, because when the U.S. wins, you win.
The good time, great taste of McDonald's.
Get a little closer with Arid Extra Dry.
To get close, I trust Arid Protection. And compared to any other leading solid, roll-on, or spray, this Arid is drier.
Get a little closer with Arid Extra Dry.
Whipping makes French food rich and creamy.
C'est bon.
It's why Weight Watchers' new à la Francais yogurt with real fruit is so rich and creamy. It's French whipped.
Weight Watchers' new à la Francais yogurt in the best French tradition.
The monster hurricane of 1988 already has made history. As it took dead aim at the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico, the storm hit the lowest barometric pressure ever recorded in this hemisphere. That's important since scientists gauge the power of a hurricane on how low the pressure gets inside the eye. But to fly inside that eye, it's disarmingly calm. The sky's blue, the clouds white. There are birds down inside that eye, but don't kid yourself. This eye, 50 miles wide, has butted thousands of square miles of territory on its way to Texas. Neil Frank is the weatherman now at our CBS News affiliate at KHOU in Houston. He's also one of the nation's experts on hurricanes and hurricane lore. He's the former director of the National Hurricane Center. Thank you for joining us, Dr. Frank. First of all, do you expect the hurricane to take even a slightly turn to the north?
Well, Dan, all of us has been looking for that turn to the right. It just hasn't taken place. And we still wouldn't be surprised if it started doing that yet this evening. And that's the key to the whole forecasting of this storm.
Dr. Frank, so far for a storm this size and of this ferocity, the casualties, particularly the death toll, have been comparatively low. Why is that?
Well, there's no question about that. That's because there's been a lack of big storm surge. It's water that kills in a hurricane. 9 out of 10 people who die in a hurricane drowned in the storm surge. And you're not going to get a big storm surge in most of the areas of the Caribbean, certainly the islands. And when you get in the aftermath of a storm like this, you see tremendous amounts of damage, as we saw in Jamaica, and as your reports have already indicated. But you can have the roof blow off, the walls come in, and you can find protection. Now, you may get broken bones, you may get cuts, you may get injuries, but it's the difference in terms of the water that whether you drowned or not. You know, I remember in Dominica in 1979, 80% of the roofs were blown off, yet the death toll was only 40.
Quickly, Dr. Frank, the worst hurricanes seem to be Virgos. They happen at this period of the year. Why is that?
Well, there's no question about that. That's the hottest time of the year. Hurricanes feed on hot water. As the sun comes into the northern hemisphere, it heats up the water. The water reaches its maximum temperature about mid-September, and that's when we get our big storms.
Thanks, Dr. Neil Frank. To find out just how powerful the wind can be, keeping in mind that water is the real killer sometimes, but how powerful the wind can be, we sent correspondent David Martin to a wind tunnel at the University of Maryland to talk with Dr. Jewel Barlow, an expert on these kinds of things, and to feel firsthand at least a fraction of a hurricane's force.
Now this is 30 miles an hour. I'd call this a good stiff breeze, but nothing real difficult.
That's true, although you wouldn't want to carry plywood around in this wind.
This stop sign here now, what kind of wind is that going to be able to withstand?
This one will probably go up close to 100 miles an hour. One on the street usually might survive to around 80.
And then this becomes airborne?
Right.
And basically then you have a javelin effect going down the street.
You could have a javelin or a sword on the edge of the sign itself.
Okay, they say out there now we're at 40 miles an hour. I can start to feel the breath in my voice being blown away. Can you give us 50? Now, if you were out in something like this, what would you tell a person is the first thing to do to get the heck out of something like this? What are you looking for that's safe?
I'd find the strongest thing in sight, get behind it, and lay down.
Okay, now they're telling us this is 50 miles an hour. You can barely make headway in this. You can absolutely lean into the thing. I couldn't fall on my face if I wanted to. You can also feel it just kind of ripping your voice right out of your mouth.
Right.
It's impossible to do anything in this kind of stuff.
I don't think you could even carry your groceries in here.
If this is 60, then we're talking with Gilbert winds 2 or 3 times this speed.
That's right.
What happens if we go up to 70?
Well, I'm not sure my shoes will hold.
Huh?
I'm not sure my shoes will hold.
Want to try it? Okay, that's supposed to be 70 miles an hour. And you can barely stand up. Your eyes are tearing. And you can just lean all the way in. That's 70.
Did it seem like your air conditioning bills were going through the roof this summer? Well, the Owens Corning attic blanket helps keep the cool air in, which can save you money in the years ahead and leave you sitting pretty. Owens Corning, we put your house in the pink.
Apples have always been tempting, but never as tempting as this. Who could resist chunks of cinnamon sweet apples sitting on a puff of pastry swirled with icing? New apple sweet roll from Weight Watchers. Irresistible.
Nature abhors a vacuum.
There's something fishy in the freezer.
Dead. Murdered.
But they had nothing to do with it.
Doug and I went straight home after work.
It's a whale of a tale.
Incredible.
On Murder, She Wrote. Then,
I was maced. My boy is missing.
a desperate mother turns to an ambitious reporter for help. Now, will her child be sold to a stranger?
They've stolen my son.
Valerie Bertinelli in every mother's nightmare.
You're letting them take my baby away.
Rockabye, right after Murder, She Wrote, Sunday.
AIDS is a killer that does not discriminate. All Americans need to know the basic facts. Write AIDS, Box 14252, Washington, D.C. 20044.
Now, you heard Dr. Frank and others talk about the term storm surge in all of this hurricane report. What is that? The storm surge is the heavy sea, a kind of mound of sea that's built up by the hurricane. It rolls ahead of the storm itself, and out there in the dark Gulf tonight, it is, to use a Texas word, humongous. The counterclockwise motion of Hurricane Gilbert, like all hurricanes around the United States, stirs up the water most to the north and east of the eye, the so-called upside of the hurricane. The level of the sea ahead of this storm, 10 to 20 feet above normal. It's a dome of water when it roars onto land, looking and acting a lot like a tidal wave. Most of the death and much of the destruction caused by a hurricane comes from that storm surge. Now, even if Corpus Christi, Texas doesn't take a direct hit, which it still may, it is sure to feel the effects of the storm surge. CBS News correspondent Harry Smith flew there yesterday to cover the story for CBS This Morning. He's there now live for us. Harry?
Thanks very much, Dan. And if that storm surge were to hit here right now, we'd be literally underwater. We took Highway 35 down this morning from Galveston. We've been in Corpus Christi now for about an hour or two. The winds are kicking up 10, 25, even up to 30 knots right now. And as we came down the coast, town by town by town, the town started to look more and more like ghost towns. You know Port Aransas, it's just around the bend from here. It's an island. They cut off the ferry service there at 3 o'clock this afternoon. It is completely vacated and boarded up. A little earlier on this afternoon, the traffic was so backed up here in Corpus Christi that the traffic on the interstate was backed up 7 miles, headed to San Antonio with people trying to get out of town here. Now, there are some folks who stay around in storms like this, and one of those people is Tom Harvard, who's lived in Corpus Christi since 1936, has never left during a dozen or so hurricanes who have hit this town. You never leave? How come?
Well, I feel that we can do a certain amount to protect our property, and we've developed a non-fear sense of a hurricane due to good warnings. And
a non-fear sense, is that, are you lucky, or maybe are you a little dumb?
I think we've learned a little. We do stay in protected areas. Corpus Christi is one of the highest places on the Gulf Coast, and we feel relatively secure.
What would it take for you to leave for this one?
I honestly don't know. I have said that I would leave almost every time, but I never do.
Tom Harvard, I hope you're around tomorrow morning when we go on the air, and we'll see if we last out this night.
Well, let's hope so. We're counting on it.
From Corpus Christi, Dan.
Thanks, Harry Storm Surge Smith. Correspondent John Blackstone and a 48 Hours crew flew to the Texas coast more than 24 hours ago, just in time to watch the exodus.
National Weather Bureau has advised everybody to be out by dark.
Crystal Beach, Texas. A tiny peninsula on the Gulf Coast and one of the first places ordered evacuated.
Going north, going north. Bobby, when it hits this peninsula, it's going to wipe it out if it hits it. Pull it over, poor boy.
The order to clear out came at noon Wednesday. There were fears within 12 hours rising tides would cut the only two escape routes, a coastal highway and a ferry.
Yes, sir, this is Bill Kelsey in Crystal Beach. Trying to get an update on our tides. Do y'all have anything?
Mayor Bill Kelsey made the decision to evacuate Crystal Beach.
We would rather be accused of being a little quick on the draw and save some lives than we would not want to be remembered that we were too late and we cost lives.
But the mayor and the police could not order people to leave. They had to convince them.
Stay scared and get out of here.
Police dispatcher John Payton. What do you tell them? How do you urge them to get out? I take it that's what you're doing.
They'll ask me, I'll tell them that the National Weather Bureau has told us to be out by 8 o'clock tonight. They'll ask me, what should they do? And I said, that thing out there in the Gulf is like a 10-ton gorilla. It's going to do what it wants to do and use your noodle and whether stay or get out. We can't force you to get out, but you should get to.
How you doing? I'm Officer Rice with the Crystal Beach Police Department. So we've been advised to tell everyone to evacuate.
Yeah, we was going to wait till in the morning.
What are people going to do who stay in their houses?
They're going to learn a bitter lesson. They're going to sit here and they're going to watch the Gulf of Mexico come all the way across this peninsula and end up in the bay, of Galveston Bay. I was foolish enough to do that during Alicia, and I learned my lesson. When that Gulf acts up and they say it's coming this way, you better get out of here.
Are y'all's plans tonight to leave?
Within an hour, hour and a half.
An hour? Okay. We've been advised to evacuate the area.
When Hurricane Alicia came through here, you stayed in town?
I made the foolish decision of staying here. I'll never do it again.
What was it like?
Well, it tore the roof off my place of business. I sit there with my 90-year-old mother-in-law at that time, my 84-year-old mother, and my wife, and all of them scared to death and giving me a fit. Water coming in on the roof, and here I am watching the Gulf of Mexico going by my drive-in window.
And what have you said to people who've been reluctant to go?
The people that want to stay and ride it out,
yeah.
We've asked them to wear dog tags. We've asked them to call us and give us the number of their next of kin and where they intend to ride this out, and that'll make identification easier after the storm.
Still, the effort to convince people to leave goes on through the night. How long are you going to stay in town? How long are the police
Until that water starts coming on that water. I mean, if people want to stay here and fight it, they can stay here. We're gone then.
By sunrise, the storm front is visible. The tides are threatening. But Crystal Beach still is not cut off. The town is almost empty, but not everyone is going. Are you still going to stay, even if this storm comes directly?
Well, sure, I want to stay here. There's no way to get out. I don't have no car. That's my only car right here.
9 a.m. The police have more to do than convince people to leave. There's a burglar alarm at Mama Teresa's pizza place.
All right. You go low, I'll go high. Ready? Go.
What happened to Mama Teresa's?
Mama Teresa, evidently in their hurry, they forgot to lock the front door. The front door come open and the alarm went off. So they're down there securing it now.
Mayor Bill Kelsey and the police intend to be the last to evacuate the town just before the roads flood.
Very successful evacuation. Had no complications with this at all.
About 98% of the people are gone, if not more. It's like a ghost town here now. They're taking our advice and staying away.
2 Galveston men may be safe in a jail for the duration of this hurricane. They were arrested for selling plywood to homeowners at 2 to 3 times its fair market value. That's price gouging, so the police arrested the pair and tossed them in the hoosegow. The first arrests that Gilbert can claim in Texas. We hope you'll stay with us now on this special hurricane edition of 48 Hours. We'll have an update on Gilbert's place and pace. Is it moving north? And a look back at the crazy weather of this summer of '88. All straight ahead.
It's tough doing business overseas.
Pardonnez-moi? Oui? Do you speak German? Ah, François, parlez-vous l'allemand? Little. Will you tell Herr Smith that New York feels his long-tongued loafers are just fine? Sehr gut.
Sagt, du hast eine gute Zunge und siehst gut aus in Sandalen.
Sagt, ich habe eine gute Zunge und sehe gut aus in Sandalen.
Sehr gut.
We can't make it any easier. But now that Sprint can save you as much as 10 to 25% on overseas calls, we can make it a lot cheaper.
This Olympic coin brings it all back. Carl Lewis.
Support our athletes with U.S. Olympic gold or silver commemorative coins. Help America shine. Offered by the U.S. Mint.
When you have heartburn, you can bet on effective cherry-flavored Rolaids Antacid. Calcium-rich, sodium-free, and a winning cherry taste. Cherry-flavored Rolaids. Tastes like cherry, works like Rolaids.
48 Hours will continue.
Get ready for that comedy giant like you've never seen him before in...
A movie?
Join Morgan Fairchild, James Brolin, and Tony Bill in Pee-wee's Big Adventure, Friday.
Saturday, John Lennon. A controversial new biography claims he was violent, unstable, a junkie. Meet the author on West 57th, Saturday.
This is CBS.
Live pictures looking out from Corpus Christi, Texas. Out there, beyond the horizon, some 300 miles, Hurricane Gilbert spinning its way on a path that would take its eye, if it doesn't change direction, change direction over Brownsville, Texas, sometime tomorrow. Let's get the latest on the hurricane now. We're trying to update you of sort of half-hour periods. It appears to be gaining some strength, as was expected, as it begins bearing down on the South Texas coast. Its advance winds and rain already are being felt along the Texas coast. The hurricane is about 300 miles southeast of Brownsville. It keeps churning west-northwest at about 15 miles an hour with an expected at least slight turn to the north. Sustained winds peaking at about 120 miles an hour. They may go up. The probable track for Gilbert is that it will land with full force, its eye, sometime tomorrow afternoon in roughly at least the Brownsville area of Texas. This, of course, is subject to change. Now, for the latest from the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables, Florida, let's go back to our 48 Hours correspondent, Bernard Goldberg. Bernie?
Dan, we're here with Dr. Bob Sheets, the director of the National Hurricane Center. Let's find out if that turn you talked about is indeed happening. Your forecasters say Gilbert should be turning slightly to the northwest.
Right. We expect a gradual turn to take place. We don't know if that's actually taken place yet. A reconnaissance aircraft will be in there shortly to determine if indeed that turn has started to take place.
If it has,
yes.
Where's it going?
Well, if it starts to take place now, that increases the threat to the middle part of the Texas coast, and we would probably have to put warnings on up the state of Texas.
Brownsville and a bit northward.
We already have up to Port O'Connor, and we might have to extend those if this starts to take place.
What if that turn doesn't take place? What then?
Then the warnings that we have will continue for some time until some turn is shown there, because it looks like we're going to have plenty of time for warning if the turn starts to take place up in the Galveston area, because so many people have already evacuated up there.
Now, let me ask you something I've often wondered about. You've got computers.
Yes.
You've got satellites.
Yes.
You've got those airplanes you always talk about.
Right.
Why is it so tough to simply say it's going to hit Brownsville, it's going to hit Corpus Christi, it's going to hit Tampico, Mexico?
It's actually the things that are going on over the western part of the United States and north over the continental U.S. that's going to determine whether this hurricane changes, not really the information we're getting from the reconnaissance aircraft there as far as the track of this hurricane is concerned. And we're just not that exact. Pretty close. In other words, we're talking about a turn inland, along the coast, or slightly off of the coast. In most cases, that is pretty good. But when you talk about the hurricane, it makes a major difference which one of those three scenarios you follow.
And pretty close could make an awfully big difference.
That's right.
So what it comes down to is these things have a mind of their own, and with all the science, at your disposal, we're just crossing our fingers?
Well, no, I don't think that's quite true. There's a limit. In other words, we know it's not going to turn northeast or southwest, but it is a zone that we're looking at here as to where it might turn around.
Thank you, sir.
Okay,
Dan?
you.
Thanks very much, Bernie and Dr. Sheets. You know, everybody reacts at least somewhat differently to the weather. What is too hot for someone may be just right for someone else. But it is an objective truth that 1988 has been a year of great swings in the weather, and there may be a scientific explanation for them.
It's going to be killer heat, very hot. Summer's definitely here.
Yesterday it was 30 below. Today it's about 15, 16 below. Kind of feels like summer out here.
According to the cows, they're pretty rough for them, pretty dry. We haven't had no rain in about 9 months.
It has been a year of wacky weather, a year of extremes.
And it's so hot that I feel like just going in the woods and hiding somewhere.
The climatologists have been looking for new explanations for this bizarre weather, and we are all learning a new term, the greenhouse effect, a change in the atmosphere probably caused by man-made pollution. The greenhouse effect is the primary suspect for the reason we're now living through the hottest decade in 100 years. Scientists say a long-term warming trend causes an increase in the extremes, more rain and more drought and more intense storms.
I believe that the Lord sends rain. That's how it is.
Some places they've prayed and got rain, but evidently we're not praying enough here.
The four hottest years this century were 1980, 1981, 1983, and 1987. And 1988 is expected to be the hottest yet.
What I saw is not a disaster in the making. I saw a disaster now.
Next year, maybe next year's our year, and I don't wish this on anybody.
Now, to talk about some of that wacky weather, James Hansen, director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies at Columbia University here in New York. Good evening, Dr. Hansen.
Good evening.
The greenhouse effect, you're an expert on that, the warming of the Earth's climate. Is this monster hurricane related to it?
Well, certainly you cannot say the hurricane is caused by the greenhouse effect, but the potential for strong hurricanes is increased as the sea surface temperature increases.
Excuse me, as the sea surface temperature increases.
That's right. Now, we expect that by the middle of next century, if we continue to add greenhouse gases to the atmosphere at the rate that we are now, that the sea surface temperature will be about 4 degrees warmer than it is now. If that occurs, we calculate that the maximum strength of hurricanes will increase about 50%.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying. So we can expect more or fewer, or we don't know, hurricanes of this size and force?
We do not have sufficiently sophisticated models to tell you about the number of hurricanes, but we can say something about the maximum sustainable winds in the hurricanes and the minimum sustainable surface pressure in the hurricanes. At the present, the lowest the pressure can get is about 880 millibars, but with doubled carbon dioxide, it may get as low as 800 millibars, and that will imply the possibility for much stronger winds.
Dr. Hansen, someone said to me the other day that they just simply don't believe in this whole concept of greenhouse effect. They said, you know, if you believe that, you believe that thunder curdles milk. Can you react quickly to that?
Well, we know that the greenhouse effect is real. We can look at other planets which have different amounts of greenhouse gases. We can look at the history of the Earth as the amount of carbon dioxide has changed, and we see how the climate changes. So we know that the greenhouse effect is real. It's easy to understand, though, that people can be skeptical. When I first got into this business myself 10 years ago, and I can remember standing on the beach when there were strong waves coming in, and I thought, gee, is it really possible that by adding these trace gases to the atmosphere that we can really outdo nature or affect the tremendous forces of nature? But no matter how we do the calculations, backwards, forwards, or sideways, it comes out the same answer, and the answer is yes.
Dr. Hansen, thank you. Hurricanes aren't new to this part of Texas being threatened, and nothing new to these Texans, but it's a dilemma when it's a hurricane this big. The dilemma is whether to evacuate or to stay put. CBS News correspondent Faith Daniels met a family that lived through Hurricane Alicia 5 years ago and today struggled with the question, should they leave?
Well, you can
start getting your bag together, get it down here and get it out of the way. You don't need wetsuits and that kind of stuff. You got all your clothes downstairs? You got everything that you need?
Gay funneling was up long before dawn.
You can start bringing this stuff inside and just get that out of the way.
They're hard to get used to, period. We've been through a bunch of them now.
As longtime residents of Jamaica Beach on Galveston Island, Gay and her husband Jim know all the signs of an approaching storm.
You ever got room for the dogs in the car?
Their own history tells them Gilbert is one to be reckoned with.
What you went through with Alicia being stuck here on the island must have been incredible. The glass would bow way out of the frame. Just way, we could see it would bow and it would spring back, you know, about 6 to 8 inches.
It seemed like
huge.
Quite a bit for glass to flex that much. And that's when we saw that the whole wall was moving. It wasn't just the windows, the whole wall was just swaying with the wind.
And the toilet exploded and the shower exploded and all the water. Oh, it's terrible. Did you think it was over? No, I was with him. He was going to take care of everything, storm and all. Major thing, we'll be tying down that sailboat. And we saved it during Alicia by tying it down. Everybody else lost theirs there.
If a storm's going to come here, at the magnitude they're talking about, I can't see this being here when I come back. This, I have to kiss goodbye before we leave. I don't think we lucked out at staying here during Alicia, and Alicia was not as strong. But I got to do it anyway.
Is it tough knowing that it may not be here when you get back?
Yep. This is the only thing I got this paid for.
If their own recollections about past storms aren't enough, they don't have to look far for reminders.
Alicia got that one. It was that and a front wall was all that was standing. That's right around the shower area. That's all the plumbing. It's all holding that up.
In fact, this hurricane, of course, it's such a large system, it's not going to go away quick.
If they don't evacuate all of Galveston, then we've got plenty of time. The traffic is one of our main concerns. You either leave before it or long after it. But our phones have been ringing off the wall for about 3 days. When are you leaving? Hello? When are you leaving? Because they want to make sure that we're going. Yes,
Jamaica Beach has about 300 families living here year-round. Everyone knows everyone else,
Hello?
And they all look out for one another.
Hi, Mr. Brown. I'm fine.
The seawall that protects Galveston to the east stops a full 15 miles short of Jamaica Bay, leaving a 22-mile stretch of the island completely unprotected. The Funlings and their neighbors head for higher ground, knowing that if Gilbert heads this way, there may be nothing left of the community they know so well.
We can't do anything about it. We can't change a thing. Just take what you want and go.
The making of freeze-dried Taster's Choice coffee. Search the world for the finest coffee beans. Grind them. And at the peak of freshness, brew the richest, most aromatic coffee you can brew. Then freeze it. Freeze-drying locks in the fresh brewed aroma and flavor until you release it. For a truly superior cup of coffee, the choice for taste is Taster's Choice.
Taste it.
If you lose control and eat an entire Sara Lee chocolate cake, you're gonna hate yourself. But only a little. Sara Lee snacks.
Nobody doesn't like Sara Lee.
Here, Elmer. Hello. Hi, Robbie. How's school?
Fine. But I think Higgins has to go out.
Amy, would you let the dog out, please? So how's...
There goes Dad for his 8 o'clock snack.
Al, we just ate. Rob, what's wrong?
Who said anything's wrong?
You're not the only one in this family who can hear.
When the people you love come through loud and clear, that's AT&T.
Extra strength Alka-Seltzer has more of what you take Alka-Seltzer for. More medicine, more bubbles, for fast relief of heartburn with a headache. Try
Extra strength Alka-Seltzer. More of what you take Alka-Seltzer for.
Along with all of the other delays that have plagued NASA's shuttle plans, now comes this hurricane. The folks at the Johnson Space Center, which is located near the Gulf Coast, just north of Galveston, outside of Houston, had 4 plans of action depending on what the hurricane did. Late today, they took the most extreme measure, telling just about all of the 9,000 employees to go home. If mission control there is damaged, it could delay yet again the seemingly star-crossed Discovery shuttle mission from lifting off later this month. We'll simply have to wait and see. More than a quarter of a century ago, it was tougher to predict a hurricane than it is now. We didn't have today's sophisticated technology. For example, we didn't have the satellites. But even with all of the advanced technology, a hurricane, as Bernie Goldberg and Dr. Sheets were saying a while ago, can fool you. It can hook around, it can make a sneak attack. Let me take you back to some earlier hurricanes and a look at the kind of havoc they wreaked. "27 years ago this week, I watched Hurricane Carla devastate Galveston. It was September 1961. Carla crossed the Yucatan along much the same route as Gilbert and headed for the Texas coast. 350,000 people evacuated Galveston before Carla hit. Still, 12 people died. By then, warning and evacuation systems were a lot better than in 1935, when this unnamed monster ripped through the Florida Keys, taking 400 lives. 6,000 people died when another tremendous storm pummeled Galveston 88 years ago. In 1969, there were 12 hurricanes, the most ever in one year.
It's bound to be in here somewhere because all these are the houses that came from in this vicinity. They're all right in here in this neighborhood. But mine was right on the corner and I don't even see it. Yonder! That gray one yonder, that's my house.
On August 17th, Camille slammed the coasts of Mississippi and Louisiana with 25-foot tidal surges and 200-mile-per-hour winds.
You could hear trees popping all over.
You can have crash.
On and off all night, all popping all over the place. Not just one tornado, but many tornadoes.
You had more wind than you could hear anything. It was going through the trees.
It looked like all hell was breaking loose.
The aftermath was chilling. 256 people dead, $1 billion damage.
I guess it really shows what you're made out of, if you can make it through something like this. I mean, some people go to pieces, most women do. But I feel like the thing to do is stay calm. It's the calm people that are going to overcome it.
For any of us who saw it, for anyone who lived through it, Hurricane Camille is something you don't forget, even almost 20 years later. Correspondent Bruce Hall is standing by now in Biloxi, Mississippi, where memories of that killer hurricane are still especially vivid. Bruce?
Well, Dan, there's a case here where anytime a hurricane comes through, the people in Biloxi and the Mississippi Gulf Coast get worried. As you can tell behind me, there's a little wind this evening. The palm trees are blowing a little bit, but not like when Camille came through with those 200-mile-an-hour winds, and most important, that 25-foot surge. I have with me a couple of people who survived that storm. George Mixon, who was here and just a young man at the time, decided to ride out the storm. And at the time, what was it like going through the storm?
It was like going through a war. We were trapped on top of our house, my father, my brother, and myself, and we were pelted with debris from trees, from building material from other houses, from the wave action of the water, the heavy rain, and the constant roar of the wind. And we were just pinned there, and we could go no place.
How did you get out?
We didn't get out. We spent 6 hours on the roof of the house praying, hoping that we would survive that night of the storm. And the next morning, after the water went down, so did the house that we were laying on top of. And from the point where the house lodged in the trees in our backyard to the ground was 23 feet. So that's how much water we had at our house.
Joe Barisef, you have been in the restaurant business for years in Biloxi. What happened to you during Camille?
Well, when we heard that it was going to be so bad, my telephone didn't stop ringing at the house. I live on the beach. And get out of the house.
You lost the restaurant?
I lost 2 restaurants.
Lost 2 restaurants?
2 restaurants.
And you lost a restaurant in another hurricane.
And Betsy, I lost a restaurant. That's 3.
But
and,
you still have a case where three hurricanes, 3 restaurants lost, you're still in the business.
And that's right.
Oh, okay. Dan, so you have a real spirit here in Biloxi. Even though they've been hit hard, they're very leery of hurricanes. They're here to stay, but they really worry about those storms.
Thank you, Bruce. Hurricanes didn't always have names like Camille, of course. Before 1953, they didn't have names at all. But in the past 35 years, they've been given names by the U.S. government agencies that are responsible for that kind of thing. And as Robert Krulwich tells us, it is some process. Good evening, Bob.
Good evening. The name Gilbert, as most people know, comes from a government list. The National Weather Service has chosen the names not only for this year's hurricanes, they've got the names in place for the next 6 years. So next year's G storm, that's the 7th tropical storm that will appear, it's ABCDEFG, will be Gabrielle, then in 1990 Gustav, in 91 Grace, 92 Georges, that's the French spelling, then Gert, then in 94 Gilbert again, and then Gabrielle, and the list just repeats itself endlessly, except when a hurricane is a big newsmaker, has a big reputation, gets a place in history, the name is retired like an athlete's number. I was told today that there will never again be a Hurricane Gilbert. It has gotten so much attention, it will be replaced with a new G hurricane, just as there will never again be a Hurricane Carla or a Camille that you just saw. No more Camilles, no Alicia, no Alan, they've all been retired. Today I spoke with the man whose job it will be to come up with the new G name this winter. He is the hurricane project leader at the Weather Service, Steve Harnett, and I said to him, well, where do you get your ideas? He says he looks in baby books and asks friends for suggestions. When he chooses the new male G name, it will be submitted to an international organization in Geneva, the World Meteorological Organization. If they like it, it's official. Every country in the world will use it. No name picked by America has ever been rejected. But in 1977, as a gesture to foreign nations, the U.S. directed that the names be internationalized. So, Atlantic and Caribbean hurricanes now regularly include Spanish and French or Haitian names. Here, for example, are the Fs: Florence, Felix, which is kind of French, Fran, Fabien, arguably French, Francis, French, and Floyd. And then off California in the eastern Pacific, the names are more Latin, since that's where the storms start, off Central and South America. Here are the F Latin names: Fabio, Flossie, Fausto, Fefa, Hurricane Fefa, Frank, and Fernanda. The Pacific list uses the entire alphabet, 26 letters. The Atlantic list is shorter because there are fewer storms in the east. X and Z, it turns out, however, are a constant problem. The Weather Service was apparently unable to come up with 6 X and Z names, so all X hurricanes are either Xavier for men or Xena, spelled X-E-N-A, for women, and the Z's are either Zeke or Zelda. And that is about as much as anyone would ever want to know about the names of hurricanes.
You're not putting me off.
No, this is all true, all research, all verified.
Thanks, Bob. And we'll have the latest on Hurricane Gilbert, the updates, when we come back, so stay here with us.
If you think cavities aren't part of your child's future, think again. Experts say he'll probably have 12 of them by age 19. So take AIM against cavities. Its extra cavity protection formula has the most fluoride. AIM is the only extra fluoride toothpaste accepted by the American Dental Association. Get the clean, fresh taste of AIM and the most fluoride. And take AIM against cavities.
Listen to the taste. Listen to the taste. Listen to it. Great taste. Can't you hear a salad from McDonald's? Tossed fresh all day. Tossed fresh all day at my place. Good time. Listen to the great taste of McDonald's. Listen to it. Listen to it. Listen to it.
Leadership. It's taking charge, taking responsibility. Michael Dukakis balanced 10 budgets in a row and still cut taxes 5 times. Leadership. It's making life better. He increased working people's income at twice the national rate and pioneered the first universal health care program in the country. And that's why America's governors, both Democrat and Republican, voted Michael Dukakis the most effective governor in the nation. Michael Dukakis for president. Let's take charge of America's future.
The master of mystery is back.
Amazing, Miss Watson.
But is he a match for crime in the 80s? The return of Sherlock Holmes tonight.
As our Hurricane Special 48 Hours continues, let's go back to Dr. Neil Frank, weatherman at affiliate KHOU in Houston and former director of the National Hurricane Center. Dr. Frank, over the next 24 hours, what should we be looking for in terms of this hurricane?
Well, the worst thing that we could have is if that hurricane moved right up the coastline here. As you know, you were here in Carlin 61. You've already made some very excellent points on your program. Now, you know, let me make one point, though, that Harry interviewed this man down in Corpus Christi, and he was making the statement that maybe he wouldn't want to evacuate. And I think there is a point to be made there. We cannot literally evacuate 2 million people out of the Houston-Galveston area. We might evacuate several 100,000 that would be flooded by the salt water. So when we talk about evacuation, and certainly that might be something that we'll have to consider within the next few hours, we're only talking about those people that are going to be flooded by salt water, not necessarily those people that are on higher ground. And you know, in Corpus Christi, you've got a 50-foot bluff there, and so some of those folks up on the bluff might not necessarily make poor decisions to stay there. If you live out on the island, though, that's a different story. So evacuation is going to be a key question as we see what this storm is going to do over the next 15, 18, 20 hours.
I take your point, Dr. Frank. It could just sort of skirt along the coast. Let's hope it doesn't do that. But you mentioned earlier no storm surge that we know of thus far with this hurricane. Is that likely to change as it nears the mainland now?
Oh, it's a far different story here in the United States, where you've got long, flat beaches, big storm surge. When you're in the islands, then the water runs around the islands, and you don't have a major storm surge problem there.
Thank you, Dr. Frank. Now, let's go back quickly to Florida. Bernard Goldberg at the National Hurricane Center in Coral Gables. Bernie, anything has changed? What are we looking for?
Well, Dan, we've got the latest figures, which are due out officially in about 3 minutes. Don't ask me how I got them. The hurricane right now is 300 miles southeast of Brownsville, Texas, 300 miles, moving north-northwest at between 12 and 15 miles an hour. Top winds are still 120 miles an hour. Gilbert, so far, has been very, very predictable. If it remains predictable, should be hitting land sometime tomorrow afternoon, either northern Mexico or the southern Texas Gulf Coast. Northern Mexico up to Brownsville and a little north of Brownsville. I want to emphasize, Dan, this is still a dangerous hurricane. It is still a very powerful, dangerous storm.
And could still take a turn to the north, and we look for its winds, now about 20 miles an hour sustained, to increase. Thanks, Bernie. That's our Hurricane Special 48 Hours. But we'll be back in about an hour with updated word on Hurricane Gilbert, and we'll try to keep you up to date throughout the night. CBS This Morning with Kathleen Sullivan and Harry Smith will pick up with coverage tomorrow, and we will report throughout the day tomorrow as events warrant, and there'll be a wrap-up tomorrow on the CBS Evening News. With a wish of good luck to our friends along the Gulf Coast, Dan Rather. Until next week, that's 48 Hours.
For a transcript of 48 Hours, send $3 to Journal Graphics, 267 Broadway, New York, New York, 10007.
A showdown in Death Valley. 10th-ranked Florida State takes on the 3rd-ranked Tigers of Clemson Saturday on CBS Sports.
This is CBS.